this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee, which has been convened as a hybrid meeting. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as possible following the meeting. The meeting agenda pack can also be viewed on the Council's website. Everyone participating in the meeting will be attending either in the Council chamber or from remote locations. Members attending remotely must keep their cameras on for the duration of the meeting. However, all attendees should keep their microphones off until invited to speak. Members and officers can indicate they want to speak by pressing the hands up icon. I'll now proceed to the agenda business. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence.
We've had apologies for absence from Councillor Stephen Easterbrook.
Councillor Clark.
Councillor Robert Smith.
Thank you. Item 2 then, declarations of interest. Councillor Clark, or is that a legacy hand? Stone, no. Thank you very much. There are no declarations of interest. Then item 3 of the agenda is approval of minutes, which is pages 5 to 18, and they are. Oh, Councillor Williams, sorry. Oh.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I need to leave the meeting slightly earlier today, so if it goes beyond midday, unfortunately, I'll have to leave you. Okay,
we'll note that, Councillor Williams. Thank you for letting us know. Approval of minutes then, as I said, pages 5 to 18 for correctness only. If there's no amendments, someone prepared to move, please?
Yes, I move, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes, do I have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you very much. Anyone against? No, thank you very much. Item 4,
Sorry, if I could just ask a question on the last set of minutes. At our last meeting, it was resolved that 2 issues would be brought to this meeting, and they haven't been. I was just wondering why that would be.
Is the one issue in regards to the home to work policy?
One was the Granicus,
yeah,
that was supposed to come to this meeting, and also the home to work mileage.
Yeah, we're going to deal with the home to work mileage on the next item. The director has kindly turned up. I don't know whether cabinet members here, leader, but
no, thank you, Chair. I'm not sure on screen if the cabinet member is on. There was it's a bit of the chief officer's here, but there's a bit of an administrative issue with the cabinet member perhaps not being informed.
Okay, no problem. The other issue, Karis?
So the Granicus issue is on the agenda. It's labelled up as the corporate complaints procedure. So sorry, it's a different name, but that issue has been brought back today.
Okay, we're on the action record then. Item 4. Stephen, you doing this for me?
Rachel's going to do it.
Oh, Rachel. Sorry, Rachel, my apologies.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair. So, yes, as the purpose of the report today is obviously to provide members of the committee with an update on their action record. And you will note that there's also an update in the report on the proposed collaborative working between this committee and the scrutiny committees. So just to summarise, the action record, as usual, is presented in Appendix A. But members will recall there was a request for the chair of the Governance and Audit Committee to meet with the scrutiny chairs and discuss how to take collaborative working forward. And this is the chairs met then just before Christmas, and there was a series of points that they have agreed. These are summarised in the report at 3.4. Some of the basic points were agreed in terms of the scrutiny committees having updates within their forward work programme on any of the proposed referrals coming from the committee, and then also to feedback then via your own action record, and you will see some of these updates then provided at Appendix A. I'll point out one of the key things agreed was that communication was key, and then also that the chairs would meet on a regular basis to ensure that communication was taken forward. In addition, the scrutiny chairs just requested in some cases that further detail was provided for referrals, obviously to provide a clear rationale to the scrutiny committees on what were the key issues with the item, just so they can put it against their own criteria. And the more information they have, the more it stands a chance of actually being taken forward on their own forward work programme. But ultimately, it was for them to weigh up that on their own, against their own criteria and against their own priorities on their forward work programme. Discussions were also held then at 3.7, the details about the regulatory tracker, and it is already reported to the cost committee, but it was agreed also that a further proposal to have any new inspection reports received by the Governance and Audit Committee are sent to each subject scrutiny committee for information in their forward work programme report. And likewise, if then this committee then sees any issues in monitoring their own inspection tracker in any of the reports, they can then potentially refer anything on to the committee for consideration. So if I take the committee to the recommendations, it's to note the action record and provide any comments, and also note the proposed approach for collaborative working between the scrutiny and governance and audit committees. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Before I invite members to come in with questions, just to say, had a very productive meeting. Thank you, Rachel, for convening that meeting. Obviously, I met with two of the chairs. Unfortunately, one of the members was ill, and I've been for some time. But I understand she's now written as well. So hopefully we'll get together shortly and discuss any issues that will arise. I think you may need to stay on this meeting today, Rachel, because some issues are going to arise in some of the later reports, because there are issues which I want to raise. But I'll keep that until a little later on. Councillor Cranville.
Thank you, Chair. Just for some clarity, when you say chairs, I have not been invited to this meeting. So are you stopping myself from going as a chair, or I suggest you reword that and say that invitees should be going to this meeting, not chairs. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, it's the chair of the scrutiny committees that were invited, because obviously, Richard, we don't make any referrals to your committee, because obviously I believe you're the planning and development control or whatever committee chair. This was in regards to referrals that we make from this committee to one of your scrutiny committees exclusively. So that's what was being picked up. It wasn't chairs of every other committee, because it's just anything we refer up, because as you remember, there were some issues around them not being picked up urgently, but we've resolved that now through Rachel's good housekeeping for us. Thank you. Councillor Davis.
I took my hand down, Chair. Thanks, Chair. I took my hand down because my question would have been to ask you how you felt about being included in the process and how it went for you. Thanks.
I know, Colin, you're very you look after my welfare here, and I'm very grateful for that. And I know you're very concerned that I wasn't invited. That's been resolved now. So rest assured that if anything's to be said, it will be said at those committee without fear or favour. So thank you very much. Okay, before we go to the recommendation, Rachel, Deb, is it? Janine, sorry, my apologies, Janine. Obviously, members were very concerned about this recommendation that had been outstanding since September 2023. It had a revised date of March 2024, and it just keeps slipping. The concern again was that we were sort of 15 months away from the original recommendation. Obviously, in the report coming up, which you're aware of, I'm sure it's got another revised date now of the 31st of March 25. But committee just wished to understand the reasoning behind the delay for dealing with this in regards to taking vehicles home and that.
Yes, not a problem. Thank you, Chair. And for the purposes of the recording, I'm Janine Nightingale, the Corporate Director for Communities. When I came to one of the last meetings, I did explain there have been some issues with personnel in the department. Unfortunately, we had a bereavement of a manager, so there has been some delay in implementing this. However, we now have people in post who are looking at it. However, let me explain a few things in terms to the there was two pieces on the GAC agenda. The parking enforcement, we got a new policy and that's coming back in April, but the one is to home to work mileage, and it was flagged that there were some officers who possibly were using vehicles to go home when they shouldn't be. Now, the policy that we have in place is that you can take a council vehicle home where there is a business case to do so, or if you were on call and for no other reason, and it has to be signed off by your manager. So one of the things we've done, we want to introduce a new policy, and that's what we're working on, strengthening that recommendation. But in the interim period, we haven't done nothing, Chair. Just to reassure you, what we have done is spoken to heads of service and discussions within CMB to reinforce the point that if we do have staff that are taking vehicles home, they're doing it on a business case, on a need basis, and that we're using it for possibly on-call purposes. So we have strengthened that. Another thing that we're doing is we're working with our colleagues in South Wales Police, because I've just come out of a meeting, actually, Chair, that's why I come to join you. We're looking at a fleet review overall. It's a much larger piece, because what we are aware of is we've got an awful lot of vehicles, and we need to make sure we're utilising them in the right way, especially with our challenging budget situation. So where we are, we're looking at a number of things. The first thing is the utilisation of the fleet. We don't want cars sitting there or vans sitting there day after day and not being used very much. Similarly, we don't want vehicles being taken home where they shouldn't be either. So the first thing we're doing, we're looking at that. Now, a lot of our operational vehicles, those that, not private vehicles, a bit different, operational vehicles have trackers on now. So what we are able to do is to, not that we monitor this regularly, but we have it for insurance purposes, so we could find vehicles if something happened. But what we are able to do is look at high mileage vehicles and where they are in the borough and the work that they've done and how they are utilised. So that's a piece that's going on with our, we have a fleet manager down in T Thomas that's shared between ourselves and South Wales Police, and he's doing that bit of work. The other thing that Welsh Government are very keen we do is to convert to ultra low emission vehicles. And at the moment, the authority has, out of all our fleet, only 15% of our fleet is ultra low emission. And in the main, they're electric. Now, we're not far behind other local authorities. In fact, we're about middle of the pack in Wales in terms of that. But what that will mean, Chair, is that we are looking at more pool cars. So that will reduce the need, if we have electric pool cars charged by the authority, it'll reduce the need for people to use their own cars. And then, of course, it'll reduce the risk of people taking those cars home. Looking at that. And then the third part of this is about the maintenance of the vehicles. At the moment, we have a joint facility with T Thomas, so we need to look at that. So it's part, this work on home to work mileage is part of a much bigger fleet piece. But I think that will add more reassurance to the committee that we are looking at this in detail, not just that one particular aspect. Now, I'm quite happy to come back to the committee when we finish that review. I will come back when we have a new home to work policy, because we are looking at that as well, to come and discuss the fleet with you, if that was something that you would find of interest, because that we're going to have far more robust policies in place on this going forward. So hopefully that has provided some reassurance that whilst you may not have the new policy that we would like to implement, what we are doing is an awful lot behind the scenes on the existing policy, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that reassurance. Obviously, I've got some comments to make. I'll make some comments, but any questions from members? Any comments from members? No, I'll just make a few points. Clearly, the business case is very important, and obviously there'll be urgency provisions and things like that. It's ensuring that there's that record to be kept so that audit, when they come in, can come in and say, actually, X, Y, and Z. I think the key issue for the committee is that we're dealing with public money. And the perception out there is that when someone's driving around in a council vehicle on a Saturday and Sunday, and I'm not saying it happens, one of the biggest bugbears I've got, and it isn't to do with Bridgend, this is to do with the fire and rescue service, they turn up in Aldi's and they park their big red truck at the end of the Aldi car park and go and do their shopping. Well, you've got a vehicle that does 19 miles to the gallon, and they're shopping in Aldi's, which I don't disagree with. I've raised it before, but I think ensuring that that's tightened up is really good. And as long as the managers are fully aware of that, because it is public money, and you'll know better than I the perception out there with the public when your budgets are squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, and someone say, "Oh, well, look at them, they're taking their vehicle home. How have they got that?" So that's not okay. I think, and I don't mean to tell you how to suck eggs. Please don't take it that way. I think a lot of this has been done before. A lot of adjoining authorities have done it. They've got, they've got pool cars. They've rationalised their fleet. I was reading only this week. Merthyr is very close to my heart, but their fleet, they're going through a renewal of their fleet in regards to rental, because most of theirs is rented, and that their fleet is coming to end of life, and by the time they do the new rental, it'll be 95% electric or whatever. And it's sweating your fleet, isn't it? That's what you need to do. What you can't do, have vehicles out there sat on the park which are not being used for week in, week out. So I think in regards to the issue which Audit picked up, is the home to work mileage in council vehicles. If that policy, and I'm grateful for you saying that you'll come back. Actually, it's something I was going to recommend when it comes up at the audit committee audit report, that we ask you to report back in June on that specific item to say that has been dealt with. And I think it would be useful. We are interested, not just interested, it's seeking the assurance from yourself as a director and the cabinet member that these matters are being addressed. And I obviously we understand the bereavement and the death in service, but that, and I don't mean this some kind of gain, it can only be used for so long. And, we've got to start moving the process on, because again, these are crucial issues to be picked up. And I'm grateful for you assuring us that that now is in play, and that hopefully when we come back, not only by the due date, but when you come back in June, that all those things will be in place to address this recommendation. And obviously any other proposals you've got coming forward to give us even more assurance in regards to the fleet this authority use would be beneficial. So thank you very much for that. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Absolutely. It's a very important issue. And I concur with you. When you see fleet moving around, that's not an official business. It is very difficult to justify. However, there are business cases where people, if they're on call, take vehicles home. But the one thing I would say, and for the committee to understand, I suppose, is this is a corporate issue for us. Because whilst I'm the director of the communities, there are vehicles in social services, there are vehicles in education and elsewhere. So this really is a corporate issue, albeit fleet management does sit in my directorate. So what an important bit of this is all the other directors and the CMB take this issue, which they are, and we're tackling it as a corporate issue. I think you'll see a very different, if we run those reports now, you'd see a very different situation. Now we've raised it, so I think we've nipped that one in the bud. And it's not that just to explain, that we have done fleet reviews in the past. It's not the first time we've done a fleet review, but what we're doing is a very, very deep dive now. Because while we're looking at fleet, we might as well go all the way in and understand. Because one of the drivers for this, Chair, is we are bringing our waste, we're insourcing our waste contract. So this time next year, we will be expecting to bring the waste fleet back in-house, and everything that, the maintenance of that and everything that relies on that. Whilst we own the fleet, it has been operated commercially for us. So that is a real driver and imperative to get under the bonnet of the fleet management piece. But no, very happy to come back and discuss this with the committee again. No problem. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I think, as you said, it is very, and in some respects, this shouldn't be looked at in isolation.
No, absolutely.
The social services
Absolutely.
fleet should be looked at with the Welsh Ambulance Service Trust. When I was in another job at a different place, we had a little lady called Mabel. And what we were looking at is who would actually touch Mabel to do various things. And you found out that social services would pick her up. But in the same street at the same time was Welsh Ambulance Service. picking up similar clients to go to the same place. And the amount of wastage in the public system is there, and it was never ever addressed. And I think, you know, I'm not saying you will address it with a silver bullet, but it's that sort of thinking outside the box as to how we can actually sweat these assets, whether it's for the Bridgend County Council, whether it's for the police, whether it's for whoever. And, you know, it is key that, or you're holding the baby here, unfortunately, and you're getting all the flag. But other directors and the chief exec needs to play his part in this and direct that this is sorted. You know, and again, I'm sure through your good stewardship, this will be resolved. Okay, Councillor Davis, comment, no mind.
Thanks, Chair. There was one issue I forgot to mention. This number 7, I think it is, in terms of the email about the analysis of compliance. Just really want to thank Joan for the work involved in that, because it was really, I thought, illuminating. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Okay, so we got the recommend. Oh, sorry, Rachel.
Just a quick one, Chair. It was just in relation to action 5. It was just really based on what we were discussing and what the report says about working with scrutiny committees. There's a request in the action for further detail of information over the issues and the rationale behind that referral. So if any members have any information, as I said, if you don't want to provide it right now, please could you contact us, or can you go by the chair, and then it's just really clearing up what really was the rationale behind that referral in order for the committee to consider it, please. Thank you.
Yeah, that was the parking penalties, wasn't it? I think there was an issue surrounding the if I recall now, is that the council uses a very specific authority to deal at Denbighshire, is whether or not there were any other options available, and you know who was doing that quality assurance, that monitoring, and that. So that was the point there, Rachel. It was in regards to that issue about, is Denbighshire delivering what the council requires, and is it cost effective primarily, because there were issues raised around it. Does that assist?
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I can certainly raise that with the chair. And
lovely. Biden. Biden. Biden, you're on mute. Can you hear us, Biden? Have you frozen? Ah, there we are.
I'm so sorry. I think my stand is. Okay. I'm so sorry. I think my stand just decided to have a life of its own today. But can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, so on item 7, that had to do with the report on performance in terms of compliance with on complaints. I'm not sure I actually saw how we arrived at 65% non-compliance from what was shared. And I think the comment also, I'm not sure whether I should just take it like that, because I think the comments were that the corporate complaint teams are not always provided with reasons why service areas cannot meet the deadlines set. Is that a good practice that we don't have the reasons why there are delays? I actually think so personally, I actually think something to look at, rather, because if someone has not been able to deliver within timeline, there should be a reason. Not that we infer that the reasons have to do with absence of key staff, but there are other corporate priorities within the service areas, because these services are actually for citizens of the council. Thank you.
We've got a report coming up shortly, Biden, on the corporate complaints process. It was raised earlier by Councillor Clark that is it on the agenda? Yes, it is on the agenda, but there's a full report now in regards to how the council's going to address it moving forward in regards to stage 1 and stage 2 complaints. Obviously, we'll have the officer available then at that report. If you've got any questions, then it may be worthwhile keeping your powder dry and posing them to the officer then, because I'm sure that it can be dealt with then. Okay,
Thank you.
That's okay. If there's nothing else, then obviously the recommendation is that we note the action record and obviously we note the proposed approach for collaborative working between Scrutiny and Governance and Audit Committee. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Martin. Someone? Thank Colin. Anyone against? No. Next item is item 5, which is the Audit Wales Governance and Audit Committee reports, pages 27 to 94. Hi, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so I'll make a start. So basically, I'm providing a briefing to the committee on our Financial Sustainability National Summary Report. This was published on Wednesday, the 4th of December, 2024. It's the third in a series of our National Financial Sustainability Reports for all councils in Wales. And just to say, there are no recommendations for local authorities in this report. The report is basically for information. It's a compilation of all those key messages from our fieldwork, and it also, to provide that balance, provides a summary of all the key challenges that the sector is currently mitigating. So our intention with this report is to be more forward-looking, looking at arrangements, whereas previously we were backward-looking and took into account, for example, achievement of savings proposals. And this change is based on feedback from the Society of Welsh Treasurers, who were involved in scoping the work, and Welsh Government and the Welsh Local Government Association. As you're probably aware, local reports have been produced even for all councils across Wales, and we presented the local report for Bridgend last September. And just a very quick recap of the key evaluation. We said that the council understands its financial position. It has good arrangements to support its financial sustainability. It flexes and adapts these arrangements as necessary, but it is at an early stage in terms of developing its longer-term approach to financial planning. So all local reports are available and they've been published on our website should you be interested in looking at them. But the national summary includes all of these key messages as an appendix, as well as some national context that we identified during the fieldwork. There's also an updated data tool. This time we've included borrowing data and we've included, I think, the last 3 years for information in that tool. So in terms of the key messages, the Auditor General considered that the financial position of local government is unsustainable over the medium term unless action is taken. He concludes that without action by the whole sector, and that is including Welsh Government, the financial future of local government is unsustainable. He says that the sector has faced unprecedented challenges, and this is since the start of austerity in 2008, and this has affected councils and services very differently. And some of these challenges are outside of local authorities' control. And I think we're very familiar with some of these issues in terms of the range and extent and complexity of demand for some services, and generally increases in costs for councils based on inflation and world events. And to varying degrees, these are beyond the council's control, so it's very difficult to mitigate the impact of these occurrences. So many of the financial challenges faced by Welsh councils are common to the rest of the UK. I think we're familiar with, the news articles of councils across the border issuing Section 114 notices, but we feel that there is some potential, there are some opportunities to learn from some of these experiences elsewhere. All councils have arrangements to understand their short and medium term financial positions. Generally, however, they do not take a longer term view of financial sustainability, and this has led to, over the years, a reliance on shorter term plans for savings and use of reserves. And councils have generally appropriate financial reporting arrangements for the short and medium term, but assessing and monitoring the impact of those decisions is or has been identified as a weakness. So we are saying that understanding and monitoring the impact of financial decisions is making it difficult for councils to understand the extent to which they're achieving value for money. And then we wanted to be balanced and, alert our readers to the issues and the pressures and the experiences of managing some of these very difficult issues, changes in processes that would make financial planning more difficult. But just to say that we've reported these to provide context and balance, but we have not explored or assessed these matters within the scope of our work. So in terms of those concerns, the funding formula, the Barnett formula has been controversial for many years in terms of how monies are distributed by the Welsh Government across Wales. The timing of local government funding settlement is generally, has been a bit late, which is obviously narrowing that window of opportunity for local authorities to set their budget plans for the following year. The lack of multi-year settlements is generally an impediment to encouraging medium-term financial planning. And then finally, additional responsibilities being placed on councils at these very difficult times without the commensurate funding being made available. So those were the key messages that I wanted to raise in my briefing. So that's all I wanted to raise, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Obviously, there'll be some questions, so if you stay online. Councillor Griffiths?
Thank you, Chair. It's not so much of a question, actually. It's more about how should we respond to this report as a council, and what do we need to change? And it was very sobering reading, and what it says to me is that at all levels of government at the moment in Wales, and actually in the UK, we are underestimating the risks around the services that are provided by local councils. I think we have significant changes happening. There's one particular page in the report, so I can't remember the page, which was a set of facts around the cost changes, and that really brings it home, I think, that this is not about mismanagement, it's not about poor operations, it's simply about demographic change, it's about cultural change, it's about the change in need of children, of older people, of social care generally. And the point that I take away from this is that we are doing okay in the short term, and we are going from year to year and just about struggling on. But that isn't sustainable, and I think that's what the overall message of the report is. And we need to think in the longer term about what more substantial changes need to be done across the council. I also reflect on further on. We have the risk assessment later on, and one of our major risks at level 20, I think, and going up at the moment, is our inability to do any major transformation. So we're not only are we forced by existential threats, but we are also in a very poor position in terms of making the transformational change which might be able to address that. So what I'd like to propose, Chair, is that and the mitigations, by the way, on that risk are very poor in the risk register. So what I'd like to propose is actually we do something which is very much on the long term, I know we have the MTFS, but there's something that we need to do much further than that, which is 5 to 10 year planning. And that needs to be something which we put within our overall governance. We ask officers to build something around a longer term strategy, to do a little bit of thinking out of the box and thinking of the unthinkable, and putting that down and having that discussed by members and also consultation as well. So I think we need to have a major effort around that long-term planning. And thank you for letting me speak for a little while there, Chair, but that's what I take away from this.
Oh, thank you for that, Simon. I think you know, the points you've made are very relevant in the current climate, and obviously the council will be responding to its own individual review on sustainability. There was one recommendation, I think, in regards to that, and it would obviously be responding to that. I think the overall opinion in regards to the rest is, you know, it's a matter for council to make a long-term view in regards to moving forward. I think, you know, with all due respect, the report, you know, difficult reading, but it says the blindingly obvious. You know, it's not new. You know, if anyone didn't think this was going to happen over the last 10 years, then you know, they were living on a different planet to me. But I think you know, at least the Auditor General's now captured that information. Hopefully, Welsh Government will take some credence of it. But you know, we'll just wait and see. Sam, did you want any comments from you?
Only to say that obviously, you know, these are such significant issues. They're informing every piece of work that we do. We're in the process of delivering our ongoing assurance and risk assessment piece of work, and we will be meeting with the council very shortly to discuss opportunities in terms of what we can do to provide ourselves assurances about the work we can do, but at the same time provide the council with some further in-depth information about where perhaps their arrangements could improve in this regard.
For that, Councillor Colin Davis.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sam, for a comprehensive report. As you said, it puts quite a stark picture. So the headline on page 34 is the financial position of local government is unsustainable over the medium term unless action is taken. It sums it all up, really, doesn't it? Very stark. Sam, I could see on page 91 that you met with the Welsh Government. What I can't see in the report is a response from the Welsh Government. I wonder if there is one, sort of, I don't know, on your website, or whether or not you could summarise now how they responded to this issue. Because, as everybody has said, it is the foundation of the work of all councils and our work. So, yeah, you may not be able to answer that in a fulsome way, but I'd appreciate some sort of feedback on how they reacted to this picture. Thanks.
Thank you, Colin. Sam?
Only to say that I'm not aware of Welsh Government's feedback, but I will definitely take that question back and provide a response for committee.
Thank you, Sam. I think that would be very relevant. It will be interesting to see what they say. I reserve comment on that, but thanks for that. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I think the report has you know, very recently landed on our doorsteps, and so I'm, you know, sure that officers would need some time to consider what the implications are. Just to take a couple of things from the report. The first one is on page 58, which I think has been alluded to by Councillor Griffiths, the timescale for different types of financial planning. Where there's a graph that compares standard practice for local authorities at the moment. For example, medium-term financial plans, 3 years, where SIPFA sort of suggesting that increases to 7. And another then about strategic planning, where currently 10 years to 15 years. I think just to highlight that, I think that's probably represents some, you know, a major sea change, and is something that we do need to consider, you know, quite carefully. The other, well, a question then, Chair, is in respect of the the information that's been given, there's a lot of data there, which does, even though the report says at the outset it's not about league tables or whatever, but what it actually presents are some very good comparative sets of data, which I don't think we should lose sight of, and it is, very important for us to see where we stand in compared to the 22 local authorities in general. So what I would ask is if it's not something that is being considered by Audit Wales, if it's possibly been taken up by the, say, the WGLA, that some sort of tabulation is made out of this report. Just a couple of other comments as well. I think the the report shows clearly how much commonality there is amongst the local authorities in Wales. We're all facing the same problem, and you can see the types of pressures that we are facing, and no means unique. But also, the very favourable position that Bridgend is in when you consider it in respect of a lot of other authorities. Thanks.
Did you want to come back on any of that?
Only to say that we have not considered any form of league table. I think it's very difficult to compare councils because of the I suppose the range of demographics and complexity of issues that they have to manage in terms of delivering their services. But just to say that data is available should Bridgend want to do that, if they consider that there are some like councils they would like to compare themselves with.
Okay, thanks. Caris?
Yeah, thank you for the comment on the issue that's raised. It's a very interesting one, isn't it, really? And I know that the Society of Welsh Treasurers were consulted on this report before it was finally published. And I think one of their concerns was about this information would be used as a league table. And as Sam has said, that definitely isn't the case. And I think, reflecting from a Bridgend point of view, actually, there's some good things in here which Bridgend are already doing, but equally there are things that we can learn from, and that's the beauty of this report. They're not league tables, and they should never be taken as league tables, because we do things differently. And some of this, the data you've seen, has been driven by years of different practice, and therefore it's not about one blip. But I guess what we could do is take away some of these and give you an explanation as to why Bridgend may be different, where we can. And some of those will be, policy decisions made here, the way we do things. But where we can, we could possibly take this data, not to justify where we are or we aren't with regards to the figures, but the reason why we may be there as compared to somebody else. We could certainly have a look at that, Chair, and feed that back to the committee at a later date.
Thank you, Caris. I think apart from the assurance for the committee, I think that would be interesting for the council to receive, because obviously it's more relevant to them, whilst we get the assurances from yourselves and as to what's been happening is, reasonable practice or good practice, but there are lessons to be learned. I think the council needs to understand it. So, no, that would be very useful. Thank you. Deb?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. First of all, really welcome the report. It's great to have a report that is forward-looking. And I think it presents some really quite clear evidence around what's going well, but where there is real challenge. I guess for me, there's 2 points. One is the point around, I think the report really challenges us to move from horizon scanning to planning and implementation. And I'm really kind of interested in, are there any examples of good practice that we may want to explore in and around that space? And they're going to be emerging, because I think we're saying right throughout Wales there is a pattern here around the long-term planning. But also with that, it gives an opportunity, because there'll be several like-minded local authorities in a very similar position, all grappling at the moment with what good long-term planning looks like. And the question it kind of lays with me is around how we can incentivise a perhaps more collaborative long-term planning with partners that may start to blur some boundaries. And what does that look like, and how do we create the time and resource in that transformation space to do that? Councillor Griffiths, I think you made that comment around the transformation piece. That's going to require an amount of time and resource to do it at a time when everyone's under pressure. How are we going to do that, and how does that form part of the longer term plan? And then my final point is this really talks to the change in demographics and has been really informed by wider long-term population needs. And we've got a chance here to really future-proof to better meet the population needs of Bridgend and wider.
Thank you for those comments. Deb, anything, Sam, from that? Oh, I think you've frozen, Sam. Karis, do you want to pick up quickly?
I mean, I can't answer for Sam, but I suppose Sam did say that this report was only recently been published. I think there's a great opportunity now for us to look at what's in here and where there is good practice to share it. You know, and I can talk from the finance side of it, really. It's certainly something that, as I said, treasurers were involved in the final drafting of this. And we're all in the same position at different stages, but we're all in the same position. So I'm quite happy to take it forward as an item that maybe we take back to treasurers and do some work on that with regards to where good practice is evident within the report, that we share it in ways that can help all of us, really. So we could certainly do that from a finance point of view.
Thank you, Karis. Sam, sorry, I think you froze. Did you want to comment on?
Sorry, I did lose signal. Well, hopefully the report will provide information in terms of who is doing what, but I would say that it's really for the council to identify, you know, where there are perhaps some other interesting practices going on. And we do also run good practice exchange events where we encourage networking between council representatives. So, and through our liaison meetings, I will also share information as and when I find it. So yeah, that's all I really wanted to say on that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sam. Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me back in a second time. I just wanted to pick up on the CIPFA recommendation on page 58 around the could cover, the bits in red, about the duration. I think Councillor Martin Hughes also referred to this earlier, and I guess it's a question of Karis, really. Is that something that we should consider changing our medium-term financial plans to extend that by extra 7 years sooner rather than later? Yeah, so question for Karis, really.
Karis?
We can move them longer. I think we all have to recognise, though, that the further out you go, the more scant is the information, and the assumptions that you have to make are you know, less based on evidence and more on you know, what you think may happen. The problem is, and it comes out strongly in this report, is that we're only on annual settlements from Welsh Government at the moment. So then to project out for 7 years is really quite challenging. The timing of the settlements, Sam has mentioned, and it's in the report. It moved forward by 2 weeks last December, but we used to have them in October, and they did used to have predicting forward for another 2 years. We haven't had that for a while, and that's due really to the financial turmoil that's going on everywhere. But if we could get even, you know, a 1 year settlement plus 2 predictive years, it would help us to push out our planning even further. But as I said when I started, the further you plan out, the more it's based on assumptions, really, and the weaker those plans become as you go further out.
Thank you for that, Karis. Are there any other comments? I'd just like to make a couple. This strategic planning and medium-term financial plan, as you quite rightly say, you know, annual settlements aren't good for local government, and if they could be, you know, a lot longer, and that's acknowledged in the report. But strategic planning, dare I mention the Future Generations Act? If you all remember, we as local authorities were asked what we're going to do in 50 years' time, let alone 15. And how you can plan for 50 years' time, you know, given where we are now, was impossible. Now, I think it continues to be impossible. So I think if we could do 15, well done. But I think, you know, it's very difficult in the current climate in regards to how you do that. The only other point which I found very interesting was the usable reserves that council's got, which are pages 64 and 65. The usable reserves have actually gone up since 2019 to 2021, and they've only just slightly dipped. So everyone was pleading poverty, but their usable reserves have been increased year in, year out. And I think, for me, it just shows the disparity between authorities. You know, when you've got Monmouthshire with usable reserves of only £19 million, and then you've got RCT with usable reserves of £215 million. You know, it just staggers me to think, you know, that there's all this money in the system, you know, which can be used for anything. And then you've got councils who are really, you know, struggling. So, yeah, I know the not the Ombudsman, the Auditor General's picked those points up because they do need to be looked at. You know, you've got councils, as you say, trying to provide all the same services, but to vary in different degrees. And then you've got some councils sitting on vast sums of money, and then others who are, you know, I'm not saying they're in dire straits, but they're in some difficult straits should anything go wrong. And, you know, the report talks about 114 notices. Okay, people may have been saved this year, but I don't think it's beyond wit of man or woman that something's going to happen in the next couple of years if funding doesn't get improved. So, yeah, I was amazed at some of the reserves. That's the new comments I got. So, clearly, it's a noting report, really. Obviously, the points have been picked up. Caris will be certainly working hard on that and bringing relevant reports, I'm sure, back to council consideration, picking up several of the points made by elected representatives because they are for council to consider. And obviously, if we wish to bring them here for you know, some information, and we can look at that, Caris, they'd be most welcome. So, someone move that we note the report, please. Colin, thank you. Can I have second there, Martin? Thank you. Anyone against? Nope. Thank you very much. Item 6 then is the corporate risk assessment.
Thank you, Chair. That's me. So the purpose of this report is to provide the committee with an updated corporate risk assessment. So this assessment is considered and updated on a regular basis, and the terms and reference of this particular committee require you to review and scrutinise these reports. So the revised corporate risk assessment is attached to today's report at Appendix A. There are currently 11 risks on the corporate risk register, and every risk has been reviewed by the Corporate Management Board, and Cabinet have also seen it. And all of these risks remain at in the high category. There are some changes. First of all, we've changed the way in which we're presenting it to you. I hope it's easier to read, and just because it's a bigger font for a start, so therefore I hope it is easier for you to read. But more importantly than that, there are some changes that we have suggested. So on COR 2019-02, which is about transformation, and I think it's already been raised this morning, we've changed the title just to include the delivery of major projects, and we've also increased the risk score against that because of the issue of the number of changes we need to make, the resources that we have, and the time and capacity we have available to do it. So, and I think that reflects something you said on the last agenda item, Councillor Griffiths. There's also then Chief Exec's 2019-01, where this again is about being able to deliver infrastructure improvements in the medium and longer term. Again, we've increased the risk score against that one to reflect we have increased, and members will know this, increasing pressure on our capital resources as well as our revenue resources. So we've increased the risk score on that one as looking forward. We may have to reduce the work that the council is actually able to fund in the coming years due to the level of pressures that we have on the funds we have available. And then finally, there's one which is COM 2020-01, which is about invigorating the economy and economic recovery. The score has been increased on that one in particular, and that's to reflect the Tata closure over in Neath Port Talbot and the fact that obviously there will be residents in Bridgend who work in Tartar and will now be faced with a loss of jobs. So that's something that we need to manage. And then, sorry, there is one other, which is EDFS 2024-01, where we've increased the score on that one to reflect the increase in pressures on individual school budgets. And again, that's something that we have reported through Cabinet and Council throughout the year, and particularly recently in the budget update. So I think overall, Chair, the overall risk level for the Council and what we're trying to manage remains high. Just due really to pressures on council finances and the increased demands for help and support due to the demographic pressures we have, and also workforce pressures and pressures that are outside of the control of the authority, actually, in relation to what's going on in the economy as a whole. So we have increased a number of the risks due to that, and I think you can see from what we've presented, we're managing a lot of risk at the moment. And just to remind you that this document forms a part of the suite of documents that we take to Council when we're asking them to consider the budget. So if we have any comments today, we'll take them on board, and then this paper will go as part of that suite of documents in February when the budget is set. So if I can, Chair, I'll just take you to the recommendations at section 9 of this morning's report.
Thank you for that, Caris. Yes, a lot more straightforward report, really. And yeah, at least I can read it now without having my magnifying glass out. So, Councillor Griffiths.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, absolutely. Much easier report to read. It's actually enjoyable reading now. It was almost impossible before. If reading a risk budget can in fact be enjoyable. But I wanted to pick up 2 points really, which was reflecting back what I said earlier about the longer term risks. And I think there's some work that we probably need to do around that mitigation of the transformation area, where I don't think we sufficiently mitigated against being able to do that yet. I think we've got some commentary there, but I'm not sure that it's adequate. So I'm talking here about Core 2019-02, that deliver transformation and major service change. It might be a short-term 20 residual risk score, but longer term, that's the one that actually will come and bite us in the longer term. So I think that one actually needs some work. The other one that I'd like to focus on is and again, it's a long-term point, is about the financial fragility of schools, EDFS 2024-01. And what I notice about that is that there's it's a focus on short-term management of school budgets and helping schools manage that budget. But if we recognise the demographic change and also the changing nature of the needs of children, where we have a lot more children who are looked after, a lot more children with special needs, a lot more children with mental health services, many of those services are better supported from a central function rather than an individual school function. So I think in the medium to long term, we need to look at the balance of the school budget between central budgets and school budgets. And I'm a huge supporter of autonomy for schools in terms of managing their own budget, but there's still a balance to be had there. And I think the changes we've seen since COVID, actually, and maybe the consequential from COVID, mean that we may need to look at that in the longer term. Similarly, schools can become unsustainable simply because of role reduction, and that's not mentioned in that particular risk. So what I'd like that risk to include is both of those aspects, which is how do we balance between individual schools and a central fund, and then secondly, how do we, sorry, I'm losing my thread here. So how do we manage the longer term roll number changes across the borough and the 60 schools? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Griffiths. Obviously, Gareth will come in now, but I should imagine on the education one, that's going to need to be referred back to the Director of Education for him to consider and to include in his report. You were sort of the messenger here, Gareth, not the determiner. So yes, thank you for that, Councillor Griffiths. Gareth?
Yeah, no, thank you. They're very helpful comments. And I think the transformation one, that's one of the reasons why we've upped the score on the risk this time. And it is something that we're looking at. If we're going to have to change services, refocus them, change the way we do things, we need that resource to be able to facilitate that and to move it on. So it is one of the areas that we're looking at, and also about actually how we fund that. So that is something that we are currently looking at. As the chair said, I can certainly take away your comments with regards to the schools issues and talk about that with the director. And if the committee is satisfied with that, I can agree some change of wording to go into the final document that comes before council in February, if committee are happy with that.
Thank you, Caris.
Yeah, thanks, Caris. Councillor Martin Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I touched on this, I think, last year. We've got some risks in here, very specific ones. And SS 2009-01 is a perfect example where there is a specific risk regarding the protection of those who are responsible for. But we also have things that seem very unimportant, but they are still statutory. So for example, freedom of information requests. I get people getting on to me saying it's taking forever to get one through, but they are still statutory requirements, and we're not meeting that. But then we go on then today, for example, I've been reporting a release of water in Litchard Cross for a couple of years. I've warned that it's going to freeze and there's going to be an accident. And of course, this morning there was an accident. And again, perhaps not, one is clearly statutory, but arguably less important. This is statutory insofar as we have a duty to, keep people safe on our highways. And then we have other things then where we've lost planning appeals, arguably because we haven't got, arguably I say because I don't know the facts, but arguably because we haven't got sufficient legal support available to us. So where is the risk in this risk register that just touches on a general inability to either meet our statutory requirements or to protect the council against legal challenge in other areas? I just think we've got a couple of specific ones there, but I think this does need to be looked at. And I seem to remember, Chair, when I first got on this committee, there was a bit of a debate, and you mentioned it, is that councils can't do everything in this environment that we're in. So therefore, there needs to be a recognition of that as a risk and some ability or the rationale as to how we manage that. And if things do have to be prioritised, how are they prioritised? So I just think it's just to me, it's just missing there. That's all as a corporate risk.
No, thank you for those comments, Councillor Williams. I think it's fair to say that we have, if you like, a risk framework. So what you're seeing this morning is those risks which are corporate, and in this kind of situation, by corporate we mean they're either cross-cutting, so they're sitting with a number of different service areas, or actually the risk is so high that one single service area can't manage it on their own, if you like, and therefore it gets bounced up to a corporate level. I think issues that you talked about, things like freedom of information requests, they are being monitored, but they're going to be monitored at service level. And if we find that actually we have a significant pressure in that area, we would then see it escalating up through the directorate risk registers, and it would then come onto a corporate risk register. So that's kind of how we deal with the escalation process with risks. I'm not in a position to answer your question really in relation to the planning appeals, but I can certainly ask somebody to come back to you on that particular one. And I suppose what we've tried to do in this assessment is, rather than having a lot of individual ones, is to categorise them as much as we can. However, it is, as I said, we do report this regularly and we do review it regularly. So I can certainly take on board the comments you make about how some issues maybe are lost in the way in which we've joined different issues under different headings, and can certainly look for the next iteration as to whether or not we need to tease anything in particular out from here.
Martin, do you want to come back? Because
yeah, if I could, and I don't want to undo the good work. And Councillor Griffith said it was a pleasure to read this one, and I certainly don't want to make it unpleasurable again. And I wouldn't want a million risks on there, but I think we might be in danger of each of the individual things may be relatively low level and may or may not, may or may not sort of escalate into something that threatens the council, significantly at a corporate level. However, there could be a sort of death by a thousand cuts here, and you could have lots of things that, you know, it's like the domino effect. What happens if on one day, you know, one day this happens and that happens and this happens, and you have half a dozen things happen, and we haven't properly captured the fact that the council is generally at risk because of our inability to manage things robustly, and I just feel that it needs to be on the radar rather than just kept at a sort of tactical level and then lost. That's my only point, really.
If I could add to what Karis said, obviously, if you look at sort of, I think it used to be called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I think what certainly what Karis has said, lots of these issues will be dealt with at the service level. They will be in their risk management plan, and the ones that come up to the top are the real big corporate issues. Otherwise, I think you acknowledge, Councillor, what you said is you could have thousands of risks in this register. As I used to tell lots of people, you can only have one what if, because the problem is, what if this happens, and what if that happens, and what happens here? And I think, you know, I'm happy to sit down with you. I'm sure other members in this chamber will sit down with you. I will tell you lots of areas where the council are not complying now. And I don't even know what the council doesn't comply with, but I'll tell you what they're not complying with, because they risk assess it. I could tell you on public health issues, because the resource isn't there anymore. So someone's got to take a decision to say, how are we going to deal with these matters? I take on board obviously, things you see them on a daily basis. I don't. But there are those corporate issues, and they need to be the biggest issues that need to be addressed in moving forward. And I would suggest that those others are service risk. But I'm not saying you shouldn't raise them. You should actually raise them with the service area to look at them. And I think, you know, moving forward, that's how we deal with it. And I think what concentrated my mind in this report is the core 1901 and the core 19.2. We've just been discussing the issue around sustainability of a council. These are intrinsically linked in my view. And when you look at the page 101, this council's cut £88 million from this budget since 2010. 88 million pounds. And I think, you know, whoever wants to raise an issue and say, why aren't you delivering services, then you need to point to that. Because 88 million pounds is a huge figure, and it is acknowledged in the documents. And you're still trying to do the best you can for what you got, but you've got to cut your cloth accordingly. There's only one pie, and it can only be cut in very certain ways. If you rob Peter to pay Paul, then that's the way it's going to be done. And unfortunately, you know, the council and you as councillors make those very difficult decisions. And, you know, I don't envy anyone in this position anymore. So, you know, I think people just need to be pointed out that £88 million cuts, which is phenomenal. Councillor Colin Davis.
Mr. Chair, my issue is related to page 111 and it is around recruitment and retention. It's a comment rather than a question. I still think we as a council could be doing more in this area. I don't think we use our resource employability bridge enough. I'll give you one example. To my mind, a member of that team could be embedded in HR, and we could be looking at all those people who apply for jobs at BCBC, who are willing to come to work with us, for us, and are unsuccessful. What do we do with that information? What do we do with that goodwill, if you like? Those people who apply for us and are unsuccessful. So it's just one example, really, of things that we could be doing more. I've said this a few times, said it this week in a scrutiny week, actually, and people are probably, I'm fed up with hearing myself. But Employability Bridge is an excellent service, and in terms of being the key employer customer for that service should be this council. It provides fantastic services to other employers in Bridgend. I think we should promote that idea far more as one solution you like, to this. But I accept the fact in terms of the risk, it is a demographic crisis, if you like, in terms of workforce and certainly council workforces. As Caris pointed out, a lot of these things are beyond our control, and you have to look at them on a regional, national basis, which I know there are bodies that do that, but I think we could be just doing a bit more in that area. But overall, I think, as Councillor Griffith said, it's a great document in terms of encapsulating, the key corporate areas for risk. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. I'm sure Caris will take that back to the relevant directorate. However, yet another issue that we always got to deal with is GDPR and sharing information. So, unless you've got an information sharing protocol between organisations, then you're going to be stuck. But, I agree with you. More opportunities for some of these people, the better. Councillor Spanswick, I think I can invite you to speak.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate that, because I know I'm not part of this committee. I'm just here to try and have an overview of what's going on across the county borough. But I feel I do need to bring your attention to expand the comments made earlier by Councillor Martin Williams, especially in the view that within the last hour, on his own Facebook page, Virginia County Independence post, regards the risk with the water, which I accept there is an issue there. There's also, when we talk about risk within the post, which he's aware, which will be aware of, there's an individual there saying about suing individual officers of this council to make it harder for BCB's legal team to protect them. So he's aware of things like that on social media. He should be removing things like that and not talking here about the risk, but actually actively encouraging within Facebook posts to sue officers of this council. Not a good risk.
Oh, thank you for that and that clarification, because obviously shouldn't be dealt with on that basis. This committee's not for that purpose. Councillor Griffiths, no longer?
No, I think you covered my comments adequately. Thank you, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay. If there are any comments now from anyone? No? Okay, if we go to the recommendations that committee note the corporate risk assessment at Appendix A, and that we agree to the changes proposed at paragraph 3.2 prior to the submission of the corporate risk register to council for approval on the 26th of February. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Mark. Can I have a seconder? Colin, thank you. Anyone against? No, thank you very much for that. We're on to item 7 now, Treasury Management Strategy. Nigel?
Yes, thank you, Chair. For the purposes of recording, I'm Nigel Smith, Group Manager, Chief Accountant. The purpose of the report is to present to the committee the draft Treasury Management Strategy for 25-26. This committee is responsible for the effective scrutiny of the strategy, and it is presented annually to this committee for consideration in advance of presenting to Council in February for approval. The strategy is required to comply with CIPFA's Code of Practice for Treasury Management, CIPFA's Prudential Code for Capital Finance, and Welsh Government Guidance on Local Authority Investments. The strategy sets out the current debt and investment position and forecast borrowing expectations given the capital projections within the capital strategy. This anticipates that the Council will need to take out new borrowing during 25-26, but this will be closely monitored alongside the capital programme expenditure. Borrowing may be both short and long term, which will be managed at an operational level to ensure the Council has sufficient cash resources to meet day-to-day cash flows and longer-term capital expenditure. To date, the Council has been able to invest cash balances as a result of the balance of reserves. However, as these are reducing, the need to borrow will increase. The Council does have a number of long-term loans maturing over the next period, which also impacts on the Council's forecast need to borrow. Members will be aware that the Council approved a change to the minimum revenue provision policy in October 2024, and this change has been reflected within the document. The figures currently within the strategy are based as at 30th September 2024, but these will be updated to reflect the Q3 position, 31st December 24, for presentation to Council in February. So the committee is asked to consider the draft Treasury Management Strategy for 25-26, and we can take on board comments made by the committee in readiness for presentation to Council for approval on the 26th of February. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Nigel. Any questions? Councillor Martin Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to refer to page 53, where there's a holding of, well, I don't know if you describe it, our situation is that we're a landlord of some private commercial properties with a value of £5 million. You can see them sort of displayed there.
Which page of the report?
153.
153.
That's
okay, thank you. You said page 53.
53. All right, okay. So I don't know where temporary lapse, sorry about that. Well, it's good that people are paying attention, Chair, that's one thing, isn't it? My understanding is that if we were in a position to look at investment now, we wouldn't take on any properties, and it's the advice of SIPFA. So we are where we are on it. Is there, you know, are these actually assets or are they liabilities? Would there be any, would it be worth sort of considering selective disposal to raise, you know, much needed reserves for us? Or, you know, I just wonder how we look at that. I take it from the Bridgend Science Park units 1 and 2, that they don't include the Innovation Centre, which I think is a join in it, where a decision has been taken recently to dispose of that site. So I think that's what sort of got my attention to this particular one. So it's basically what are we going to do with these properties, and do they pay for themselves? Is it a good time? Is it a good long-term investment, or should we be looking at disposal?
For that, Martin. Nigel?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, in terms of what we do with these properties, that's probably not something that we can answer here, and would need to be advised by other people in the authority. I just do want to flag, though, that we do get a rental income off these properties, so we do hold them as assets on our asset register, and then they do attract an income. So from that perspective, there's a benefit of them.
Are they also a liability, though? Even though you get a rental? And again, I don't know whether they're full repairing leases. Are they, presumably they're all leasehold properties? Well, you don't, sorry, you may not know, Nigel, I apologise. If they're leasehold properties, then obviously there may be a continuing liability for the council unless it's a full repairing lease with complete, you know, reconstruction and that provisions. But again, the point I think you quite rightly made is it's a matter for a different place in some respects, whether we whether the council dispose of it or not, and maybe it's something to look at in the future should money become tight. Sorry, Mara, I don't mean to steal your thunder, but if you've got anything else to pick up from Nigel, I'm sure you may pick them up.
Well, I suppose what we can take away is to have a discussion with the service and provide members with you know, a brief summary of what each of those are. And you asked the question about whether in the longer term we should be reviewing them. Well, we can ask that question. Maybe we usually send a note out, Chair, afterwards with that information on. We can find that out and share it with councillors.
Yeah. I think Martin raises a very relevant point, though. If you're, I'm not saying, I don't know whether you are selling the Innovation Centre or whatever it is, if that belongs to the county borough, is there a benefit to sell the other units as well as a whole package? Would that be more attractive to the marketplace rather than just selling one piece off and keeping the other two? I don't know, but it's a very relevant question, Martin, I think. Caris, you can pick that up with us. Lovely, thank you. Councillor Simon Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair. I just noted that this also came to COSC a little while ago, and most of my comments I made there. But I'd like to add one comment, which is in previous meetings I've asked for a glossary, and I would have to remark on the excellent glossary that's attached to this document. So I thank officers for making sure that we have all that information in this report. And this report doesn't change very much from one year to the next, which is actually a good thing. It means that we're in a good place with this. So thank you very much, officers.
Thank you for that, Simon. Any other comments from anyone? Questions? Any comments? No. If we go to the recommendations then, I think the recommendation is that we note the Treasury Management Strategy for 25-26 and that we recommend the final updated Treasury Management Strategy reflecting the latest financial information available as at the 31st December 2024, which Nigel will obviously update, be presented to Council for approval on the 26th of February 2025. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Colin. Seconder, Martin, thank you. Anyone against? No, thank you very much. Item 8, Statement of Accounts, Lessons Learned.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be aware that the Statement of Accounts were completed in November 2024, and these have now been published to the Council's website. Following the completion of the accounts, a review of the process has been undertaken to identify lessons learned or that can be learnt in preparation for the production of the 24-25 statements. Members will recall that there were a number of unadjusted errors identified during the audit, which were reported to the committee. These were not material to affect the true and fair view of the accounts, and the team always strive to prepare an accurate set of accounts, both for members to consider and also for the audit process, and obviously final publication, and that will be the case in the current year as well. The team already have in place a number of processes to minimise the risk of error, and these are set out in paragraph 3.2 of the report. In addition to these, we will be arranging a workshop with finance colleagues to prepare for this year's closing process, which gives the opportunity for us to listen to feedback and seek ways to further improve our processes. A couple of the specific areas are also indicated at paragraphs 3.4 and 3.5 of the report, including consolidation of City Deal and the use of an asset management system. Discussions are ongoing to seek improvements in these areas, but these may carry through to the 25-26 accounts. A positive meeting was held with Audit Wales in January in terms of following up and preparing for the next audit, and a number of positive outcomes and improvements moving forward have been set out in paragraph 3.6. So the committee is asked to note the positive actions undertaken and improvements anticipated in readiness for the 24-25 Statement of Accounts process. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel, for that. Questions? Councillor Griffiths?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just trying to find which paragraph it was. So it's about the Cardiff City. Oh, yes, 3.4 on 172. There's a change happening at the moment in that the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal and Unrelated are changing it to become the Corporate Joint Committee for South East Wales. And two questions really, which is, the first one is, how does that affect the statement going forward? And do we already have to change the nature of how we reflect the City Deal in the accounts? And I'm not quite sure, does the City Deal actually now cease and this becomes a CJC activity? Or is the deal still stand and the CJC is something entirely different? From an accounts perspective, I understand from an organisational perspective what's happening, but I don't understand from an accounting perspective what's happening between the City Deal and the CJC as we go forward. So that's point one. The second one, Chair, is a more general point, which is in a number of committees. I sit on the CJC scrutiny, and so I have a fairly good idea of what's happening. But in conversations I've had with councillors and in committee meetings, there's a distinct lack of understanding about the difference between what was there before and the CJC now. So what I'd like our officers to consider is how do we communicate to members and officers, in fact, the different nature of the CJC and its additional responsibilities above and beyond what's previously the Cardiff region. So 2 points. In other words, how do we deal with that shift in the accounts? And then secondly, how do we make sure that officers and members are aware of the new structures? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Nigel?
Yes, thanks. Thank you for the question. In terms of the accounting, in essence, the accounting will be the same. We will include our element of the CJC into our statement of accounts. And we've had discussions already with our audit colleagues about how we might proceed with that, similar to as we did last year. In terms of the second question,
I say in terms of the second part of your question, I mean, CCR as was do come to make a presentation to full council on an annual basis, I think it is. So they have been within the last 12 months to talk about the changes. But I think the point is well made, because there have been significant changes. And I think actually I did take away an action from a comment at this meeting fairly recently about how we ensure that all members are aware of the activity of CCR and how we feed those into the processes. So actually we are looking at that. Maybe, as Councillor Griffiths has said, because there's been this significant change between CCR and now CJC, maybe what we do need to have is a member briefing on that to outline exactly what those changes are and how Bridgen fits into that and how Bridgen feeds into the governance of that. I'm happy to take that away, Chair.
Thank you for that, Caris.
Thank you, Chair.
Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just a quick question on paragraph 3.5. It talks about the Audit Wales recommendation that was made last year in relation to the AMS. The report talks about the lack of time, so it won't be done this year, but I was just wondering what the difficulty is with that there, please.
Sure.
I think we're having discussions now with our corporate landlord colleagues, and it is about looking at a new system, which I think will inevitably take some time to bed in. Given where we are now within the financial year cycle at the end of January, it's unlikely we'll be able to progress that in time for this year's audit, but discussions are ongoing. We, of course, do have our own fixed asset register that we use, that we do record our assets on, as well as a means of record keeping, and we'll be relying on both that and the work that is provided to us with the valuations to try and ensure this year's accounts proceed as necessary.
Okay, thanks. Is there anything else that we can do for this year as an interim measure, just to avoid some of the sort of pitfalls that happened last year?
Yeah, we will take a closer look at the work that's done in terms of valuations, and try and work closely with both our corporate landlord colleagues and our auditors to try and minimise any risks that are likely to happen. There are a significant number of assets that we do hold, and we will be trying to do spot checks as much as we can.
Thanks.
Councillor Davis?
Thanks, Chair. On page 171, Nigel referred to the workshop. You did just mention it. Just to clarify, has the workshop taken place, or is it due to take place?
Thank you for the question. We haven't. It's due to take place, so we anticipate it'll be towards the end of February with our finance colleagues.
And what sort of format are you looking at? Are you going to look for an outside facilitator or something like that? And presumably the outcomes will be incorporated into future reports, yeah?
We do it internally, so I would probably lead that session with colleagues from across the team, and it is an opportunity for us all to be quite open and frank about what worked well in previous years, and what areas perhaps we can develop further, maybe in our processes or our systems, to make it more efficient and more effective, to help us then. We will then incorporate those changes for future years, and we do update. We provide a closing pack for colleagues. And if there are things that we can do that we can bring into that to help the process, then we will adjust that as necessary.
Any other questions? Any comments? No, just a couple of comments from me. Just thank the team again, and certainly colleagues from Audit Wales. I'm sure they'd attend if you needed them at your workshop session to give you some support or clarification than that. So just thank the team for that. I think this lessons learned report is very important moving forward. You know, we've got to be in a sort of continuous improvement mindset, and I think this is addressing that. And I think even for next year, this year, Nigel, not next year, this year, we're a month, we come back a month, don't we? Because we have to produce the accounts a month sooner than we did last year. So I think, you know, those lessons learned and the pressure that puts upon you and the team to get them in place a month earlier is quite significant. And I think, you know, that teamwork ethos is great. So just to say thank you and thank the team for that in moving forward. On the issue which Councillor Griffiths picks up, I think it's a very relevant one in regards to where do the minutes of the Central Cardiff Capital Region Board go to, and where do the minutes of the Joint Committee now go to. I don't know whether they are reported anywhere in the Council, and in reality they should be. And the reason they should be reported is that the Cardiff Capital Region were providing a function which you delegated to it through the scheme of delegations. You allowed them to carry out functions in regards to various functionality. So because they were doing that, they should actually report back, and it should come back into the council to enable council and councillors to raise questions if any needed to be made. And I think whilst there's a different mechanism now in regards to this joint committee, I think it'd be very prudent to bring those minutes just for information initially for people to look at and what's being discussed, because otherwise you're going to bring an annual report back and members will just want to know what's happening. So I think it's a democratic services question really, Gareth, in regards to why aren't these minutes being, and it's not in regards only in regards to Cardiff Capital Region, it's in regards to the education consortia that they provide it, and any other joint committees you've got, because all you've done is you remain responsible for the function, but someone else delivers it for you. And I don't mean again to be telling people how to suck eggs, and I'm not here to do that. But you just need to be mindful of that, because you can get caught out sometimes because everyone thinks everything's hunky-dory, and actually there are issues which the council may want to address, and that's something you may want to ask Kelly or one of the team to look at. Councillor Griffiths?
Just in support of that statement, Chair. So just focus on the transport responsibility of the CJC for the moment. It's quite extensive, but it's also quite complex in the relationship between Welsh Government, CJC and the local authorities, especially for things like the bus transport, where nobody's quite sure at the moment who lays out routes, who provides the services, or where the money's coming from. So I think there's a real requirement for all of the parties to be fully aware of all the decisions that each of those bodies make on these topics. So completely welcome your suggestion there, Chair, and second it.
Thank you. And again, the other, obviously I sit on a couple of other councils, members of the Cardiff Capital Region. The issue is with them, they've balanced accounts. They've got a set of accounts for 2022, 23, I think. But they still haven't balanced this year, have they? They haven't got a set of accounts for last year, sorry. So you're always running behind in regard to the Cardiff Capital Region, and it'll be interesting to see how the CJC goes. So, okay, if there aren't any other comments, then the recommendation is that we note the contents of the report. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Martin. Can I have a second there? Colin, thank you. Anyone against? No? Item 9 of the report on the agenda is corporate complaints.
So shall I introduce the report, Chair, and then my colleague Phil O'Brien has just joined us if you've got any questions. So the purpose of this report is to provide an update to you on the current process and a proposal on the way all corporate complaints will be monitored, recorded and reported going forward. And this is the report that was requested at the last GAC meeting when we looked at the complaints report that you had. So the report outlines for you the work that's been done in recent years to improve our monitoring and recording of corporate complaints. The work has included input from the corporate complaints team. Our business managers in each directorate have had an input, and also some input from our platform design team as well. So this work did clarify that there was a need to develop a single system to record all complaints from right across the authority. So members will see the recommendations from an internal audit report of the complaints process, which was done in July 2024, at paragraph 3.1 of today's report. Work has been done to look at the options and to build the requirements that resulted from that report to actually feed into a system build, and that work is now commencing. So I just really take you to the recommendations at section 9 of the report, Chair.
Can I just say welcome? Thank you very much. I'm sure there may be some, well, I'm not sure there may be, that's stupid that is. There will be some questions for Philip, I'm sure. So any questions? Martin, I was right.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've read the report. It's encouraging to see the direction that we've taken on it. What I'd like to ask through yourself to Phil, Chair, is on paragraph 3.9. There's more opportunity for members of the public to report complaints directly, and there's also a facility then for particular staff members to take on complaints on behalf of those residents. I just wonder if there's a role for councillors, because I think, one of our roles, I think, is to advocate on behalf of certain constituents. And it would be good if perhaps through the portal that we had an opportunity to deal with those issues instead of having to refer people on to somebody else. Thanks.
Morning. Thanks for the question, Councillor Williams. As part of the development of the process, what we'll be using our digital platform, so the complaints form will be available to residents, staff, and elected members if needed. That wouldn't be an issue in making that available via the council portal to all elected members if needed.
Yeah, thank you. That's Councillor Hughes. That's okay. Just before I invite Andrew to come in, I think it's very, very important. I've raised this at every complaints, and not just for Bridgend, but every other committee I belong to, is that councillor complaints usually don't get captured anywhere. And we've got authorities saying, oh, we've only had 300 complaints this year. Actually, if you multiply the number of members they've got by 2 times 200 days, it comes out sometimes about 20,000 complaints, because the people on the front line are the elected members. And it's the whole issue is, when is a complaint not a complaint? And I think there's a lot of under-recording about complaints. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having 20,000 complaints, as long as lessons are learned from it. And I think that's the key area. How do you address service inefficiency or ineffectiveness? And I think if that can be done in Bridgend, I can use it as an exemplar then in 2 other authorities I belong to. And actually, I can also raise it with the Ombudsman, because they're not interested either. They think, keeping the numbers low shows a good figures, but it doesn't. I think, once you address the real issues, if the members can deal with it, I think you've raised it before, Martin, haven't you? If you can deal with that, then if there's a availability on the portal, that'd be great. Thank you for that. Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a comment, really. I think the report is quite pleasing in terms of direction of travel. It's on paragraph 3.7, so I note the working group have got a definition of a complaint. It's those 4 bullet points there. But I suppose I'm slightly nervous and looking for a little bit of assurance, because it does say there's confusion over what a complaint is. So if we are designing processes and systems for something that we haven't actually properly bottomed out as a committee or a local authority, it just makes me a little bit nervous. So if we could get some sort of assurance, but how we're sort of squaring that off, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hi, we were actually led by the sort of central information team, really, in terms of that. So purpose of this was to sort of look at what the current definition is of a complaint, and to sort of build the process around that. But if there's a need to sort of revisit that, then I'm sure this is something we can look at.
Maybe worth bouncing off the Ombudsman, see what their view is as well.
Yep, I agree.
Thanks, Andrew. Bayadin?
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. My system is just not today. Yeah. So thanks actually to the team for coming up with this system that helps with complaints management. And I've gone through the build period and the process. So this solution is not going to be developed or delivered until November, bearing any project hiccups. So the earlier question that I raised then becomes important. That, and even in the system being developed, one is that how then do we ensure that there is a feedback mechanism when timelines for resolution of complaints are not met? Because the information that was provided to us in the course of the month says that most times responses are not provided when SLAs are breached. So how would the system actually ensure that responses are provided on each and every complaint when they are breached? And even depending when this solution is developed, how do we ensure that this is also the situation, so that by the time we are transiting to the new solution, everybody will be used to that way of doing things. Thank you.
Thank you, Biden.
Okay, thanks for the question. So the benefit of the system really will be to enable us to sort of automate some of that process, which is currently undertaken manually. So we will be building in categorization, so we can categorize our complaints quite simply to help us understand what sort of complaints are coming in. But it will also allow us as well then to sort of route complaints directly to the relevant service areas. We would be able to build in some automatic processes so that we automatically send in and escalate in any complaints that are coming close to, that are outstanding, that are coming close to the SLA, which hasn't been responded to. And also by capturing all that data within the one system will hopefully help us to produce better reports at the end to understand performance and responsiveness to complaints. The other benefit would also be to make sure that the customer or the complainant is kept updated, so that which at the moment, once they've submitted the complaint, they don't get any response really until that the response comes back from the complaint. So it's making sure that customers updated throughout the life of that complaint as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's the point Biden was making. It's very important if someone makes a complaint, they get a regular update, because otherwise they feel, well, why make a complaint? No one takes any notice of it. So it's very important from a customer service perspective that people are, are fed back with a complaint, fed back with a response to the complaint, even if it's dealt with, or, they don't consider it's a complaint or it's an easy issue to resolve. So I think, that's if that can be built in, that will be very, very important. Colin.
Actually, yeah, my point is also on 3.7, echoing Andrew's issue. And I echo Gareth's point as well about making sure that it ties in with any legislative requirements, and the Ombudsman would have a working definition that covers all of us, I guess. So it'd be silly not to look at that. And I know you're also competing with other definitions in law, social services, education, things like that. Given that, when you finally come up with a definition for the council that we can use, how are you going to I know it's an ongoing piece of work, but any ideas around how you're going to publicise then to the public what we feel a complaint actually entails? Thanks. Right.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Yeah, well, the intention will be, as part of the development project plan, we will factor in what we need to do in terms of our online presence. We do need to understand, we need to look at the website, to look at how we develop a web page so that the definition is clearly out there, what people defines it. A couple of complaints are made at the moment. It's quite easy at the moment, I suppose, for people to make a copy complaint, and in reality, there's an argument whether or not it is a complaint in the first place if they haven't given the service an opportunity to resolve that issue. So we'll be building into the process as well, some sort of triage process to see whether or not that, have they reported it to the individual service first? Should it be a service request? So we'll be building out, once it's all clear and we've built a web page, we'll be guiding people through that form asking the leading questions to make sure that we capture the information we need before it goes into that corporate complaint.
Councillor Martin Williams.
Thank you, Chair. And I agree with your point about, we need to know what's going on and what's going well and where there's room for improvement. So the number of complaints or the number of things shouldn't be necessarily seen as a bad thing. On that note, I've got one point that's kind of turned into two. So with your indulgence, I'll ask the questions, and then I'm going to leave. So you'll have peace and quiet then. But a little bit of this confusion that's been touched on at 3.7. In reality, whether it's a complaint or whether it's ultimately a claim or some sort of formal action, it's all about severity and your hierarchy, as you said earlier. What we're really talking about is non-conformances and non-compliances. It's it's when the authority has done something that is below the standard that it's set or against its processes, or it has, I hate to use failed, but it has failed in some way. And ultimately, whether it's a complaint as defined by the Ombudsman or by legislation, it really just comes down to who's reported it. So I guess my question is, all of these have a cost. There's a cost of non-compliance, and those who work in industry will be well aware of this. So whilst this is a really good step in the right direction, what I'd like to see is future steps down the road, is that we're trying to, we're not only understanding what's gone wrong and how we resolve it and the customer journey and all the rest of it, but the cost of non-compliance. So what's in there? What are we doing that could be better, and what's that costing us? So are we thinking of the cost of handling the complaint, the thing that's been highlighted? Is the remedy now costing us more than doing it correctly in the first place? I mean, it would be really good to follow the best practice of industry and down the road move forward to that. Look at everything as a non-compliance, forget complaints. It's just a category of non-compliance, and ultimately understanding the cost of failure, for want of a better word, and then we've got then we've got the size of the prize that we can go after and potentially invest in that. But I'd like to see us do more of that. Perhaps not now, not this year, but I would like to see that as somewhere we're heading towards. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Obviously, I think the complaints process is a loss leader, really. You'll never make any money from complaints. And I think the other thing is not all complaints are upheld. And actually, they are, as we say, they're complaints alleged something's happened, and it doesn't necessarily mean it has happened. So I think, we just need to be very careful around that, and I think that's where that triaging and that sifting and that looking at it, you know better than I, elected members. I'm sure you get a complaint every week about someone's rubbish not being collected, or the green waste isn't collected, or there's a pothole at the end of the street or something like that. So I think those are the issues, and I think they're very relevant then, Councillor Williams, as to what savings are being made, or as a result of improvements and things like that. So, a lot of information. As you said, devil's always in the detail. So that's the main thing. Councillor Granville.
Thank you, Chair. Phil, I wonder how you're going to get around the situation with customer service officers not in each directorate. And I would go a little bit further, Chair, than what you said about sending a letter, right? I would, if you can't get an answer from a directorate, there should be a holding letter. At least you're being polite and courteous, right? And they'll be waiting for that letter then, right? But I want to know how you're going to get round, because not every directorate has got customer service managers answering for that directorate. So how are you going to get around that? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Granville. Obviously, as part of the project team, we've got representatives across the organisation involved in that to help us develop the new process going forward. We'll obviously, it will be stage one. We won't be looking at pulling in social services into that. So we'll be developing the corporate process for other directorates other than that. But we will be looking at replicating some sort of process, what we've done with our other processes, where we will build in an escalation, and we will get people responsible for responding to complaints. There was an audit requirement saying that everyone dealing with corporate complaints need to undertake the e-learning module. So we'll be making sure that people set up on the system will have undertaken that ahead of them going live on the system. So there'll be things in this, and we'll constantly be monitoring the responsiveness anyway to tackle in any areas which may not be responding as we would have liked.
Yeah, Richard.
Can I come back on that, Chair? Well, that's fine, Phil. But are we saying as an organisation, where you've got customer services in different departments, right? Are we going to then put all them together and make one corporate service to cover all the directorates, so they're all in one hub, so they can talk to each other and sort it out and get things back out to people a lot quicker than what's happening now?
That won't be the plan. So customer services, the central customer services team deal with a variety of service areas at the moment. So where we can support centrally, then we will. However, other complaints that come in for specific service areas will have to go to those services to respond to, and it's those people we'll be working with to try to get them into the system and responding as needed.
Thank you for that, Phil. But can I just say, look, DC hasn't got a customer service, right, and there's other departments, so it's going to be hard work, I think. But I would just go along, Chair, what I have said about an holding letter. I think that is something that we should be doing. Thank you.
I think the only thing I would add is it would be like a virtual team, because I think what Phil has said is there will be identified officers in every service area. So when a complaint comes in electronically via the system will send it to that person. Now, sometimes it might be a customer services officer. Actually, other times it might go direct to a planner. It really depends what the complaint is, really. But I suppose what we will have is a virtual team within the system. And what we are incumbent in doing then is making sure we keep that up to date, so that because it's not a team all sitting facing each other, you won't always know about changes. So that's obviously background work we need to make sure we do to keep that distribution flow up to date, really.
I think something that may satisfy you, Richard, is that when this new system is up and running, I would hope that we'd be able to run some reports and say 10 complaints were sent to Directorate A. 100% came back within the 5 days time scale, or 10 days. 5 complaints went to Directorate B, 0 came back in the time scale. And on that basis, I would hope then that we can call them in, because actually what it does, it identifies a service failing, which will reflect upon the council, not on the directorate, it reflect. And the other issue we've always got to be in the back of our mind is a referral to the Ombudsman for maladministration, and they will pick up issues of non-compliance with complaints. You know, if people are very lax about not dealing with something, then there needs to be, people need to take A, responsibility, and B, accountability for what they deliver. And if people are not prepared to do that, then they can come and speak to us here, in my view, because then we can make that point. So we'd like to support you, Phil, in regard, the unfortunate thing is you and Karis at the end of the sausage machine again here, whereas there are others out there who are sat in their offices miles away thinking, oh dear, we haven't done something. Well, they'll have another thought coming, because they can come in and say hello to me and the committee. That's if I'm still here, and the committee, because they need to be accountable for what they're doing. And if we're not doing so, we can always learn from complaints, but we can also say that isn't a complaint. We can't deal with that because it's not an issue. Anyway, I'll go off on one otherwise. Right, Deb.
Yeah, hi, Chair. It's a slightly different point, and one I think I made at the last meeting. Complaints is part of the picture. I'm also really interested in where we're capturing compliments, how we're bringing those forward, and we're utilising those to understand learning and to positively support culture that we want to see in the local authority. And often some of those compliments can allow for innovation, local innovation, and some spread and scale across the rest of Bridgend and reduce some of the unwanted variance that we're all kind of leaning into in terms of the complaints itself. So I'm really interested, what are we doing in that compliment space? Is that going to be built into the process? And can that give us the fuller picture of how our service provision is being delivered?
Yeah, we will. The intention is that we will build in the functionality to enable people to also make compliments in the system. So it'll be a form. One of the first questions will be, do you want to make a complaint or a compliment? And the relevant questions will lead at that. But then that will allow us then to capture all that information within the one system to help provide sort of reports at the end in terms of any compliments or complaints we receive.
Deb, I'm with you 100%. The unfortunate thing is that a local authority doesn't celebrate success. It will take all the brickbats from everyone else out there in the county borough who wants to throw mud and whatever at it and pick up those issues, and there may be some issues that will stick. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't celebrate success, and it doesn't promote success, because the council does a phenomenal amount of really good work in communities, which it should get complimented for, but it doesn't celebrate it. And I think there is a time and a place sometimes where self-promotion is very important. And it's not just this, it's every authority. My authority never used to do it. It's very important to get a balance and proportionality out there, that not everything is bad in a council. You know, there's some really, really good work. Yes, there are areas for improvement, but you tell me any other organisation where there are no areas for improvement. There aren't. So celebrating success and compliment is very important. And it will also raise the self-esteem of the staff as well.
Absolutely. Check. May I just come back in on that? The bit that I'm keen to explore is what we're going to do with our compliment, and what is it in the system that then builds that opportunity for cross-corporate learning, and to explore whether that then can be implemented on a county-wide basis. That's the bit in the process I'm not understanding. Not just how we manage and report the compliment, but what are we going to do with that to improve service delivery?
Thank you, Deb. Thank you for that. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to bring up about the importance of the system, and that it's kept up to date. Because if that member of staff that is responsible for inputting or whatever leaves the authority, then the next person needs to be on that system, because even members of staff leave this authority, and as members we don't know, we're never informed. So it's important that that system is kept up to date.
Thanks for that, Councillor. I'm sure that will be taken on board.
Councillor Clark, that is something which we will look at. We do intend doing some sort of 6-month user reviews as well. So we go around checking that people are still, who set on the system, are still in place and still responsible for managing the complaints. But we are hoping, as part of the project team, to work very closely with all our colleagues across the organisation to build that relationship and process, really.
Cool. Even more people. Councillor Granville.
No, Chair. I just, if the debate is wound up, I'm just asking your indulgence. Can we have a 10-minute break, please?
You're ahead of me. Just hang on. Hold. Colin.
Yeah. Can we just ensure this topic comes back? Thanks.
Any other comments? No? Okay, if we go to recommendations then, obviously we note, this is the recommendation, we note the recent review of the corporate complaints process and the upcoming development of a new process and digital solution. And I was going to put another recommendation in before you actually commented, Colin, that a report on the update on progress being made on the development project mentioned in paragraph 3.11 be brought back to committee on the 19th of June 2025. The reason I say that, in paragraph 3.11, you've got the project will take approximately 5 to 6 months. If you could bring back just an interim report to say, after 3 months, this is where we're at, picking up some of the points that have been raised about definitions, etc. I think that would benefit the committee. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank Colin. Seconder. I'm going to have to take Richard as a seconder. He's woken up. Anyone against? No, thank you very much. Well, I'm just going to ask that we adjourn for 10 minutes, but just be reassured that the meeting will not last longer than 3 hours. Okay? If anything's left, it'll be adjourned.